For this week, we have Rav Kook on MAGID Part 2. Last week, we began by looking at the build-up to MAGID. So we talked about Rav Kook's view of Kadesh as being more than just Kiddush, more than just a sanctification, but an imperative to the Jew who's sitting at the SEDER to sanctify. The word Kadesh is an instruction that the Jew should create sanctity. I didn't bring the sheets from last time this time, but we translated a bit of Rav Kook on that there. We moved from that into Orchatz and Karpas and talked about the food and the dip and necessity and pleasure, and that we eat for two different things in our life of liberation that we achieve. And then we talked about Yachatz and how the matzah split in half, in part representing the material, that we're remembering the material at the moment of our elevation, even as the other half is the elevation, because the matzah is both. It's the slavery in Egypt, and it's also the trip out of Mitzrayim, and recognizing that both parts are necessary steps. One of the major themes that we saw is that the galus is necessary for the geula. The slavery in Egypt is required in order for us to become our end product. And that was a theme we carried into the Magid, when we talked about Mascha B'Gnus and Mesayim B'Shevach, how you start with the degradation in order to end with the Shevach, with the praise. It's not just a history lesson of you were here, now you are here, but rather it's understanding that the here, where you were initially, was necessary in order to create the person you are today. So it's not that we've left the Gnus behind, it's that the Gnus has evolved. Either that of the idolatry of our ancestors or the slavery in Egypt has evolved in order to create the people we are today. We then talked about Halach Ma'anya, and three themes within Halach Ma'anya. One, we talked about the Aramaic and the possibility that it was enacted after the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash in order to say it's true that we eat lachma anya in the sense of poor man's bread because it doesn't have the mitzvos of the land of Israel because we're now in exile. But remember that our ancestors were slaves in Egypt. They also ate lachma anya. They didn't have those mitzvos and they made it out, and so we can make it out as well. That was one point. Second point was the galus creating the geula, the exile creating the redemption, and the idea of two kinds of growth. There's growth that comes about when you drive for growth, and then there's growth that's a result of repression, where you've been held down like a spring and then it's released. So the Jews come out of Egypt with this force. That was a second theme. And then the third theme was chesed, and inviting people into the home, and that's chesed that creates geula, creates redemption. So we provide people with kol dichven yeseh v'yechol. If you are hungry, physically hungry, come and eat. And kol ditzrich, anyone who is in spiritual need, yeseh v'yifsach, should celebrate Pesach with us. And by giving to others, both in terms of a material sharing with the matzah and a spiritual sharing of the Pesach, we merit Lashana Haba, we merit the Geula, the redemption. So that's 40 minutes in 2.5, which means you didn't need to be here last week, because you just got it all. But we move on to Avadim Hayinu. And as we said, Avadim Hayinu it's right after the Manishtana, which isn't because there isn't a lot to say in Manishtana. There was always a lot to say in Manishtana, but nonetheless. Avadim Hayinu is the Gnus phase, the description of our original degradation in Egypt. And reading through the paragraph quickly, so there are more I'm going to share. Avadim Hayinu leFaro b'Mitzrayim. We were slaves to Paro in Egypt. Vayotzienu Hashem Elokeinu misham, and God took us out of there, biyad chazaka, b'zron Tue, with a mighty hand, with an outstretched arm. And had Hashem not taken us out, we, our descendants, and our descendants would all be slaves to Paro b'Mitzrayim in Egypt. Okay. Basic question which Rav Kook asks here is, why do we need this elaborate description of our initial state? Avadim Hayinu, right? We were slaves to Paro, b'Mitzrayim in Egypt. It seems like, I'm just looking through to see if I have the outline sheets from last week somewhere in my folder of sheets, because it would probably be useful. It's not for myself. It's because not everyone was here. So I sometimes keep old sheets, but I don't think I kept these. All right. So Avadim Hayinu Lefaro b'Mitzrayim is a threefold description. Right? We were Avadim. We were slaves to Paro, and we were slaves to Paro b'Mitzrayim in Egypt. What do we add with this? What are we adding here by emphasizing these three things? I'll throw in a Dvar Torah which has nothing to do with this, but someone asked me a question yesterday. If you look at Rashi on the Parsha, when he talks about the construction of the Mishkan and the choice of Bezalel, and the choice of, really on the Bezalel point, it describes Bezalel's lineage. It says Bezalel, son of Uri, son of Hur, it's the tribe of Yehuda, and there are all sorts of Divrei Torah about what we're emphasizing there. But the fellow pointed out to me that Rashi, when it says Bezalel, son of Uri, son of Hur, emphasizes Hur is the son of Miriam, which in and of itself, okay, it's good information, not everybody realizes it. But Rashi says it 3 times in the Chumash. Hur comes up first when the Jews go to war against Amalek, and Hur is one of those holding up Moshe's hand. And Rashi says, Hur, by the way, is the son of Miriam. And then he does it again regarding the Egel, when Moshe goes up the mountain and he says, if anyone has any questions, go ask Aharon and Hur. And Rashi says, Hur is the son of Miriam. And then he does it a 3rd time with the construction of the Mishkan. When Bezalel is picked, who's son of Uri, son of Hur, Rashi says, by the way, Hur is the son of Miriam. Rashi is not in the habit of repeating things for nothing. So he asked me, so why does Rashi say it these 3 times? And my thought at first was, Rashi often quotes Midrashim, so maybe there are Midrashim on each of these 3 psukim that say it. And so Rashi is quoting the Midrash, and I hunted and I couldn't find any. So then I wondered, and this was my suggestion to him, maybe it's because these are 3 different roles that Hur is playing. And Rashi is showing the way that Hur's mother, Miriam, in fact is sort of the ancestress of these roles. Where in the first case, the role of fighting Amalek, she is the original defender when she stands to defend Moshe. When Moshe is on the water, she is the defender originally.
She also stood up to Paro.
She also stood up to Paro as a midwife. Good point also. And then Hur as the counselor for the Jews. If you have any problems, go to him. Is reflected in Miriam and her advice to Amram and Yocheved when they weren't going to have children, and she's the one who gives them the guidance. And then the Mishkan, and as the one who's going to facilitate the relationship for the Jews with Hashem, is her role after Yam Suf, where she leads the women in song afterwards. So I just thought that was a really, there's a triple reference there, because it's a triple role, and really in different ways. And so I thought that was nice. That has nothing to do with this, except that Miriam and Yitzias Mitzrayim go together. So good, you have another Dvar Torah to give at some point. But here, this is a completely different triple. It's Avadim Hayinu, we were slaves, Paro, for Paro, b'Mitzrayim in Egypt. What do we learn from these 3 references? What would you do with this?
It's really tight historic description. It's where, to whom, when, what.
Right, it's a kind of a concise summary of what was going on.
There's no loose.
Right, because there were times when we were in Egypt, we weren't slaves to different to different leaders and whatever. So it's.
Well, we were never slaves to Paro outside of Mitzrayim.
Right, but we weren't slaves to every Paro.
Right.
Right?
That's a good point. So in a sense, it's actually a reverse sequence. First we were in Egypt.
Right.
Then concomitant with that, there was a Paro.
Mm-hmm.
And then there was a new Paro. And then we became Avadim. Mm-hmm. So in a sense, it's a reverse order. That's interesting. I hadn't thought about it that way.
Well, it kind of ties into the end also, that if we hadn't been taken out, we'd still be slaves. Well, history has taught us Paro would have been gone, but we may, in our minds, still have been slaves. So you can be slaves to Paro and not be in Mitzrayim. You can be it's just...
It's funny you say that, because look carefully at what it says there. About exactly that. If Paro,
okay, so there we go.
Yeah, well, but look at the way it emphasizes the triple again.
Right.
Had Hashem not taken us out, we and our descendants would still be slaves to Paro
In
in
Mitzrayim.
Mitzrayim. So this is really strong. This triple is here for a reason. So Rav Kook suggests that there is one level of slavery in which one is a slave to one's own king in one's own land. And as terrible as that is, you're serving your country, and you're doing so in your own land. You're at home. Worse still is to be a slave of a foreign king in your own land, right? You get conquered by some other nation, and they make everybody work for them and pay tribute and so on, but at least you're in your own land. Mm-hmm. But the worst is you're a slave of another king in a foreign land. That's this sort of triple, not demise exactly, but it's the worst degradation and the worst alienation that you could have. Now, this fits in with concepts that Rav Kook discusses elsewhere in terms of the land and the neshama. Rav Kook is very into the idea that every nation has a unique soul, and that soul is in tune with the land in which that nation is meant to reside. Now, as an immigrant population in the 21st century, it's hard for that to resonate. In other words, the people who came to Canada came from Italy or Germany or England or wherever, and they all came here at different times and in different places. So we don't look at nations in the same way as Europeans do, based on their cultural history. But the idea is that originally, when you look in the Torah, a nation is defined by the geographic area it occupies. And people do not move around much. This is their identity. And so Kook talks about it, obviously, primarily with the Jews and the land of Israel. The idea that the Jewish neshama resonates most in the land of Israel, and that's where it's best able to connect to Hashem. So here you have the Jew dislocated geographically and made to work for a foreign king. We're on the worst level. And Hashem took us out, and notice the way it's described, Vayotzienu Hashem Elokeinu Misham. So, Vayotzienu, Rav Kook says, he took us from being Avadim to become Banim, to be children of Hashem. Hashem Elokeinu Misham. From there, from Mitzrayim. So it's Vayotzienu, no longer are we slaves. Hashem Elokeinu, as opposed to Paro. Misham, from there, from Egypt, to be out of Egypt. So he removed us from all three of those layers. And had he not done that, we would still be in these three types of alienation and types of slavery. Rav Kook's eye for language is very, very sharp. We then get to the story of the Chachamim sitting in Bnei Brak, and there's a lot we could say, of course, about that story. But I wanted to jump quickly to the next one, Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, because people skip that a lot. I mean, they may be saying the words, but they're thinking about whether the soup is going to burn. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah says, Harei ani kiven 70 shana lo zachisi shetei omer yitzias Mitzrayim balelos. This discussion has nothing to do with Pesach. At its core level, it's a discussion about Shema, and saying the parsha of Vayomer at night, whether there's a mitzvah of talking about Yitzias Mitzrayim at night, every night of the year. And Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah says, I am like 70 years old. The Gemara mentions Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah's premature aging. This is somewhat problematic when you think about it, because it defeats the purpose. In other words, Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah says, if we take the Gemara on its simple level, when he says, I am as though I was 70. I'm really 18, but I look like I'm 70, and I never merited to win the argument that we should say it's Yitzias Mitzrayim at night. If he's pointing out that he's really not as old as he looks, that in fact he's a kid, why is he surprised that he never won the argument? What's his point? So the Rambam in his Perush HaMishnayos on this Mishnah, where Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah has the discussion about Shema at night, says that Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah started to age before that. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah used to slave in the Beis Midrash. He worked day and night and denied himself food, sleep, whatever, and therefore showed premature signs of aging. And that's where it came from originally. And then you had that story about him appearing old. So his statement is not, look at me, I have premature gray hair, and yet I can't win the argument. His statement is, I slaved all my life, and I worked myself to the bone, and yet I never won this argument until along came Ben Zoma, who is identified in the Gemara as someone who achieves great wisdom at a very young age. Ben Zoma and Ben Azai are known for achieving greatness when they're still in their youth. So he says, I could never win this argument about saying Vayomer at night until along came Ben Zoma, the upstart in the base Midrash, and he taught it. And he won the day, which I think is important for the Haggadah. I think I wrote this actually in an article that's going to show up in the Pesach to go. That we need both of these at our table. We need the sage who worked really hard his whole life and has grasped things through that, and we need also the kid who's going to come look at this with fresh eyes and his own natural talent and come up with insights that the elderly sage isn't necessarily going to get. How much of an age difference is between Rav Elazar ben Azariah and Ben Zoma is hard to prove, but my sense of it is, based on their relationships with Rabbi Akiva, that there is a significant age difference in between them. But that's a longer discussion. In any case, he says, along comes Ben Zoma, and he is the one who shows that we're supposed to teach about Yetzias Mitzrayim. We're supposed to learn about Yetzias Mitzrayim at night, because the Torah says, remember the day you left Mitzrayim, all the days of your life. The days of your life, if it had just said that, would have been the days. All the days of your life includes the nighttime. So Rav Kook asks, what's the big deal about saying it at night? We have mitzvahs in the Torah, things that have to be said every day. Right? We have certain things that we're supposed to remember on a daily basis. Tefillah is supposed to go on according to there's a debate between the Rambam and the Ramban, but Rambam's idea is that there's a biblical mitzvah of praying every day. It doesn't have to do with day and night, just every day. The mitzvahs for the Rosh, Zichron, things that we're supposed to remember on a daily basis, they're not day and night. Why are we supposed to remember Yetzias Mitzrayim, remember the departure from Egypt, day and night? What are we adding here?
Does it go back to what we said last time about the hope that the night representing the dark times and the galus and whatever, that the hope is we were redeemed then, we'll be redeemed in the now too.
Right, so part of it could be the night as hope. Rav Kook sharpens it a little bit by saying that night is also preparation for the day.
Mm-hmm.
The day is the goal. The night is the hachana, the preparation for that goal. You rest at night in order to be able to work during the day, unless you work the night shift, in which case this doesn't apply to you. But the Yetzias Mitzrayim plays both roles. In a sense, Yetzias Mitzrayim is sort of like childbirth, in the sense that when people have children for the first time, right, so they go through pregnancy, and each month of pregnancy having its own challenges and difficulties, and you get past this hurdle, and then there's the next hurdle along the way, bless you, and you feel like you got to the end of the 9th month, and now the baby is born, and like, oh, now we made it. No. Now it's starting. This is where it begins. This is not the end. So the idea is that Yetzias Mitzrayim is very much like that. It's a goal in and of itself. Yetzias Mitzrayim is day. Right? You went through this horrible slavery in Egypt. There are people who didn't make it out. For them, it was their entire existence, was born into slavery and died in it. They suffered in it. And so Yetzias Mitzrayim is itself a goal. But really, in terms of the history of the Jewish people, it's a beginning. It's preparation for the next stage of their existence, and ultimately the repair of the world and the creation of a world that's going to recognize Hashem. Hashem says to Moshe, right, Ehyeh, I will be, Asher Ehyeh, as I will be in the future. I'm with you now, I'm going to be with you in the future, because you should know this isn't the only stage. There are more stages coming. And so the mitzvah of reporting this, Sipur Yetzias Mitzrayim, describing the departure from Egypt, is more than just it's more than just a goal for us of accepting Hashem as king. It's also preparation for us to be ready for Geula, to be ready for redemption. So that's the idea there. In emphasizing that you have to say this not only by day, but you have to say it at night also. It's not only a goal, it's also preparation.
Well, it fits into the way that Hebrew, the day starts the night before.
Good point also. For many things. Although not everything. But yeah, for many things it's true. Okay. So I actually wanted to jump from there to Korech. And not because the rest of Magid isn't interesting, but because the themes that Rav Kook develops in Korech fit into this point about how we look at day and night and the dichotomies within the Seder. Rav Kook has two main takes on Korech. I apologize if there are crumbs. And I've got to rest. Rest assured, these are matzah crumbs.
We usually have a sticky Haggadah.
I didn't bring them all. There were some of them where I just said I can't bring that. The way that Rav Kook looks at Korech, Rav Kook in general, you've probably picked up on it already, loves dichotomies. He loves this, there's the preparation, and then there's the goal. There's the slavery, there's the freedom, and so on. So Rav Kook does that with Korech, which is handmade for it, so to speak, because of course it's matzah and it's maror. And what better, dichotomy can you have than the bread that symbolizes getting out of Egypt and the maror that symbolizes slavery in Egypt? Although you could twist that, but I won't. Rav Kook looks at Korech sort of as the reverse of what we did with Yachatz. When we talked about breaking the matzah, and you had the two halves separated, the material and the spiritual, so now you're unifying two halves by bringing together matzah and maror. And we'll look at two different themes he develops. Number one, Korech as the unity of the different types of service that the Jew has. And maybe the best way to do it is actually to look at the sheets I gave out. This time I brought the Hebrew with the English because I didn't have the lack of space on the sheet that I did last time. We'll take a look in the Hebrew first, and then we'll try to translate it. Shnei hakochos halalu. Okay, you can see I gave you the English there as well. Shnei hakochos halalu. These two forces. Koach ha'avdus, the koach ha'cherus, the force of slavery and the force of freedom. Tzrichim anachnu lahavinam, we need to understand them. Lo betor shnei kochos nifradim, not as two separate forces. She'enam poalim zem zeh, that don't work together. V'chol echad misyached b'miktzara echad b'chayim, each one having its own area. Its own area of dominance in life. Ki imhem shneim mechubarim yachdav umashlimim zeh et zeh. The two of them are joined, and they are complementary. So the force of slavery, represented by the maror, and the force of freedom, represented by the matzah, are not meant to be looked at as two separate fields. They actually are joined. Hamatara hatachlitis tavo rakim hayedia v'hahakara sheshnei ela hakochos einam sosim zeh et zeh kiyem mechubarim yachad. He says the ultimate goal will be achieved only when we see and recognize that these two forces do not contradict each other. Rather, they are joined together. And together they create, they create for this world, they make real in this world, the ultimate freedom. He coins a phrase. He says, the honor and the strength of this will only be revealed when you have the crown of Ha'avdus Haromema. Ha'avdus Haromema is, I translated on your sheet, as exalted servitude, which one might think of as oxymoronic. What does that mean, exalted servitude, right? Either you're a slave or you're exalted, but not in his mind. Avduso shel melech hakavod, the service of the King of Glory, shehi hacherus hagemura, which is the ultimate freedom. And the way Rav Kook describes it, what he's getting at here, and I actually see that I didn't bring the entire Hebrew for it. I apologize, I missed that. But what Rav Kook is seeing here is that we need to use the power of our personalities, our exalted state, in order to subjugate ourselves. In other words, we have within us the ability to do wonderful things. But the same drive that gives us the ability to do wonderful things can make us do terrible things. Right? When you read about some of the charismatic leaders who are out there who end up going astray and doing terrible things, it's the same power that's driving them. The power, it isn't coming from two different places inside. It's only a question of whether they get themselves under control or not. Do they let themselves run away with their dreams and desires, or do they subjugate the power that they have to turn it towards a positive end?
Like redirecting.
Sorry?
You redirect. You don't diminish the power.
Right. When you look at, you see it unfortunately most dramatically with teachers of adolescence, right? When you see the people who have the charisma to be able to really attract the kids and inspire them, they can take that and help the kids to become wonderful, or they can take it and abuse the power that they have. It's the same power. But if they become selfish with it, or they construct in their head some grandiose dream of why what they're doing is okay, then they go off in horrible directions. It's the same power. It's only a question of how they're using it. So what Rav Kook says is, we need to be able to use the power of our own personalities, our exaltedness, to get ourselves under control, and ultimately to make ourselves into avadim to Hashem, into slaves to Hashem. And that's what he's talking about when he says this exalted servitude, which he identifies as hacherus hagemura, as true freedom. And he says that's what you accomplish with korech. You create a sandwich which combines the maror, slavery of Mitzrayim, with the matzah freedom of the Jew leaving Mitzrayim. So this is about becoming a true Eved Hashem, a true servant of God. That's number one. Then he has a second theme that goes, yeah.
Does he view matzah solely as the freedom aspect, or does he look at also even matzah having that equal opposite, both slavery and the freedom aspect?
Right, so that's the beauty of symbols for Rav Kook. He can use them or not use them as he chooses, so that earlier in the Haggadah, when he deals with Yachatz, he talks about matzah as either, not either, as representing both, on the one hand, the slavery and the redemption. So he does that, he certainly does that there. The other piece of it, or I shouldn't, every time I say piece of something, I think of the broken matzah. But the other side of his korech analysis is korech as the unity of the two lives of the Jew. We talked about, and this brings me back to why I jumped to korech. We talked about leaving Mitzrayim at night, and mentioning leaving Mitzrayim at night, and we said day represents the goal, and night represents the preparation. And we said that leaving Egypt itself plays both roles. It is part goal and part preparation. The mitzvah of Sipur Yetzias Mitzrayim, of discussing leaving Mitzrayim, is both. So this is represented in the matzah, maror, and korech. The matzah is Kabbalas Ol Malchus Shemayim, recognizing Hashem as king. It's Hashem's revelation before the dough could rise. Maror, on the other hand, is Abdus, is slavery, right? Which is our preparation for receiving this. So when we eat at the Seder, we lean for the matzah. We don't lean for the maror. We don't lean for the slavery which prepares us. We lean for the matzah, which is Hashem's revelation to us before the dough can rise. But we want and we need both together. If you go back for a second in your Haggadah to the Arba Banim, the 4 kids, and their questions. The She'eno Yodei Lishol. What do we say to the Eino Yodei Lishol? Ba'avur zeh asa Hashem li b'tzeisi miMitzrayim. Because of this, Hashem acted for me when I left Mitzrayim. What is this? What is the this in that sentence?
The sandwich?
Well, Korech isn't on the table yet, but the next line tells you. The next line in the Haggadah says, I might think you have to do this from Rosh Chodesh, because after all, Hashem gave Moshe the mitzvah on Aleph Nisan, HaChodesh Hazel Lachem, and so on. No, it says Bayom Ahu, you'll tell him on that day. On that day, does that mean during the day when you shech the Karban Pesach on the 14th of Nisan? No. Ba'avur zeh, for this. Lo amarti, ela b'shah sheyesh matzah u'maror munachim lefanecha. I said it as ba'avur zeh. You have to have the zeh in front of you. What is the zeh that is in front of you? Matzah and maror. What the Haggadah is saying is, ba'avur zeh, because of matzah and maror, Hashem acted for me when I left Mitzrayim. But there's a problem with saying that ba'avur zeh means matzah and maror. What's the problem?
It didn't happen yet.
There wasn't.
Oh no, that's okay. The mitzvah's been described there. But what's the problem? Just look at the sentence.
What's your question again?
What's wrong with saying that the words ba'avur zeh refer to matzah and maror?
Singular.
Singular. It should be ba'avur elu, right? Ba'avuram. What is this? It's to take a look at Rav Kook on your sheet, the second paragraph I have there. He says, Matzah makbelas neged mashu tachlis be'etzem, shu kabbalas ol malchus shamayim. He says, matzah is parallel to the tachlis be'etzem, the goal, which is kabbalas ol malchus shamayim, accepting the yoke of Hashem as king. Umaror al shem shemiru, etc. Hu neged hahachana. The maror, which is because they embittered the lives of our ancestors, that's the preparation stage. Shehahachana she'anu muchanim l'kedusha ha'elyona ha'gedola shetisgale aleinu la'asid lavo. The preparation via which we are prepared for higher kedusha, the great higher kedusha, which will be revealed upon us in the future. He mitzach now shosenu muchanos lazeh. That only can come about because our spirits are prepared for it. Al kain omer ba'avur zeh, and so it says for the sake of this, lashon yachid, singular, velo ba'avur eleh, not because of these, lashon rabim in the plural, ki moreh al hisachtus hahachana im hatachlis, shu chibur yom v'layla. He says it's indicating the union of the preparation and the goal, the night and the day. So it's ba'avur zeh. Don't look at matzah and maror as separate. Matzah and maror are two halves of a whole, which was needed. And so Korech has this particular power and resonance. When the Jew takes the matzah and the maror and puts it together, he is recognizing that ultimately everything that Hashem planned had a purpose. Being an Eved in Mitzrayim had a purpose, and getting out of Mitzrayim had a purpose. And the two served the same goal. You can't have one without the other. You follow?
Mm-hmm.
That's the theme that Rav Kook gets at. which, again, it starts already in MAGID. It's a theme that he already brought in back there, but it comes to full fruition when you see what he does with the korech.
So it's almost a climax, the korech, at that point then, when you brought them all, and you've literally brought it all together. You've seen the whole story, and you're bringing the two together.
Right, and then you're ready for Shulchan Orech. At that point, you're ready to eat your meal of cherus, your meal of proper freedom. Exactly, that's the idea. And then he goes on from there, and he has the food, and he has the afikomen, and so on. The phrase that he uses for Shulchan Aruch goes as follows. I should have brought it on the sheet. He says, "Kishahachayim misatrim b'shnei kochoseim, koach ha'abdus v'koach ha'cherus." He says, when life is crowned with these two forces, the force of slavery and the force of freedom, az na'aseh hechsher ha'chayim lo rak netiyah tiv'is, ki im davar shera'ui lemidas ha'seichel hamuchletes gam kein el ahavo. He says, at that point, I'm gonna end up messing it up if I'm gonna do it as an on-the-spot translation. I really should have done it in advance. But the sentence that I wanted to get to was the following. He says, "Lahoros shahashulchan hu inyan haholech haloch va'alei b'mareches hachayim mehanoas hachush shel hatam el ilui chush hayofi v'chein mimenu el chush hamusari v'hasechli v'chein hala b'ma'alosav." He says the table is something which continues to ascend in the levels of life. Once I've reached this point in which I have recognized the preparation and the freedom and the need to subjugate myself, to use my own powers to rein myself in as a servant of Hashem, he says at that point I am ready for the ascendancy of the table, the Shulchan Orech, going from the basic pleasure of taste, when you taste the food, hanoas hachush shel hatam, el ilui chush hayofi, to the greater level of recognizing and sensing beauty. V'chein mimenu, and from that appreciation of beauty, el chush hamusari v'hasichli, to higher levels of ethical development, of spiritual development, of intellectual development. So my Shulchan Orech is not simply downtime during the SEDER, right? It's not simply, okay, now you need to eat, so go have some food and then we're going to keep on reading. Rather, once I have elevated myself through the course of the MAGID, I'm able to experience a meal in which we incorporate these elements, and in which the enjoyment is not simply a physical enjoyment, but is an appreciation of the beauty that Hashem has given us, an appreciation of our redemption, and which features that kind of dedication of Hashem. And he says, "V'zeh ha-seder she'eino nifsak lo yavo ki im al yedei hachoveres hane'emana shel koach ha'avdus v'hacherus v'hahashlama shel kol echad b'fnei atzmo." He says this kind of continuum of growth can only come about with the combination of the force of slavery and the force of freedom, and the completion of each one in itself, and then their joining in this. That's the height that one achieves with Shulchan Aruch. Good. I echo that. I say yay also. Good. And I think that that'll cover us for now.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.